I've never had a driver's license, and I sometimes have dreams that I'm in a situation where somebody's driving and they pass out at the wheel, and I have to rescue them and I don't know how. So maybe I should learn one of these days, but it just hasn't happened yet, so we'll see if it ever happens. Are you a Susanna? You're a Suzanne.
No, it's Suzanne.
Oh my gosh.
No,
So nice to meet a fellow SUZ.
right.
Thank you so much for being here today. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Susanna Ryan, and I am the creator of an Instagram comic series called Seattle Walk Report, and I'm also the author of a book called Seattle Walk Report, an illustrated walking tour through 23 Seattle neighborhoods, which came out in 2019, and another book called Secret Seattle, an illustrated guide to the city's offbeat and overlooked history, which just came out in August of last year. It's not quite as well known, but some longtime fans may also remember my first grade smash hit, The Adventure. It was also sort of a meditation on walking in which two friends with a shared hairstyle journeyed into the woods, saw a bear, and then decided to go home because it was getting late. Let's start with the basics. In case you're not familiar with Seattle Walk Report, I take notes and photos as I walk around the city and then use those notes to make a comic. Here's an example from a 30-mile walk I took a few summers ago from Seattle to Bellevue the long way via Lake Forest Park, Kenmore, and Kirkland, so all around the upper half of Lake Washington. It was quite an amazing day. On this particular walk, I heard "on your left" 35 times on the Burke Gilman Trail. I got 8 pebbles in my shoe, and I saw a snake in Kenmore. I was so excited. I saw this building on the left, on the east side, and I thought it was cute, so I took a photo. And then when I got home and researched it, I actually found that it was the oldest existing building on the east side. So I drew a little ghost in the window, just in case. Under notable finds, we have an Apple AirPod, left ear, just the zip of a Ziploc bag, a corn cob, and my inner strength. This was definitely the longest walk I've ever taken. My Fitbit was very proud and perhaps just a little bit concerned that day for all the walking I was doing. But not all of my walks are quite so intense. Sometimes there are times I've just walked around for a mile or so, like this 1.5 mile long walk I took around Seattle Center and Lower Queen Anne, where I saw 4 zip ties. Wow. Since 2017, when I started walking for fun and making this comic, I have walked over 10,000 miles in Seattle and the surrounding areas. And whether I'm on Alki or the Rainier Valley or the Central District or here in beautiful Green Lake, I am constantly amazed by the sheer volume of wonderful and mundane and wonderfully mundane things all around us. Things that we often overlook. But even a couple of years ago, if I had heard my future self uttering the statement, "I have walked over 10,000 miles, I would be like, is she okay? Does she need a doctor? Did she join some sort of walking-based cult or something?" It used to take me all day to muster up the enthusiasm to walk a half mile to the grocery store up the street from my Capitol Hill apartment. There are hills, there's people with clipboards wanting me to save the whales or whatever. In other words, no thank you. I'd so much rather just be happily inside with a big old cup of tea. And I have just never been the athletic type, walking included. In middle school, my gym teacher called me the least motivated, least athletic student she had ever seen. To my beautiful face. I know you can only see half of my beautiful face right now, but trust me, the rest is just tip-top. You are so much more likely to find me doodling in the margins of my notebook or making an extremely elaborate birthday card for my grandma. Well, I've never had any formal art training. Drawing is just something I've always genuinely loved to do. My mom always told me I was born with a pencil in my hand, and I thought she meant it literally until I was way too old. One day I was like, wait a minute, something about this just isn't quite adding up. But my biggest artistic influence was, and honestly probably still is, someone named Sally Kilroy. Sally wrote this drawing book that we randomly had kicking around my house as a kid called the Copycat Drawing Book, which at the time Book Review magazine Kirkus Reviews called cheerful but uninspiring. and an early start in learning to draw the wrong way. Regardless, I spent countless hours poring over the pages as a kid, and to this day I still really do credit it as my big artistic kind of awakening to see all the ways that she would draw these flowers and trees and that kind of thing. So wherever you are, Sally, thank you. I really appreciate it. I continued to draw throughout most of my life, but never found myself wanting to pursue it as a job or a side business of some kind. When the thing that you love turns into a job that you're doing to make money, you run the risk of sucking all the joy out of life. And I just didn't want to do that for something that I cared about as much as drawing. And to be completely honest, I just felt like compared to other people, I wasn't really that good or remarkable. But then something very weird happened. Despite my lifelong aversion to physical activity, one day in 2017, something compelled me to leave my apartment on foot without a destination in mind. With a single step out my front door, it all clicked. Almost instantly, Seattle began revealing itself to me in ways I had never taken the time to notice before, and everything I saw seemed remarkable. In a Capitol Hill park that I had lived blocks away from for 7 years but never even knew existed, I found a Tamagotchi, these little keychain toys that were popular about 20 or 30 years ago, hanging on a tree branch. It felt like magic to me. An abandoned pile of goldfish crackers on the sidewalk was no longer just random litter. It was a tasty little sidewalk mystery waiting to be unraveled. I wondered endlessly about the things I was seeing, about the people I passed on the streets. It just all seemed amazing. These little stories playing out thousands of times a day on hundreds of sidewalks across the city that you would be so quick to not notice and that I had never noticed before. And I realized that I didn't need money, a car, or a week off of work to see new and fabulous things. There was this whole world hiding in plain sight in my own city that had been under my nose this whole time. From that day on, walking was all I wanted to do. Any day off or spare hour was spent just wandering around, from Capitol Hill to Georgetown or Fremont to Northgate, wherever I happened to be, to wherever I found myself hours later. After a month or two, all these walks started to blend together in my head. So as a way to remember them, I got the idea to start taking notes and create something that I envisioned as an illustrated travel journal for my own city. I thought I'd record the route, the mileage, and whatever happened to be interesting about that walk. It seemed like a great way to combine my newfound love of walking with my lifelong love of drawing. When the idea for what would later become Seattle Walk Report came into my head, I thought I'd keep it to myself, like most of my artistic pursuits, or more realistically, I thought I would hold myself back from even trying. I'm absolutely no stranger to self-doubt, and self-doubt has prevented me from doing many, many things in life. But for some reason, I just couldn't stop thinking about this Seattle Walk Report idea. I can talk myself out of anything, but for some reason, I couldn't talk myself out of this. So I took a notepad with me on my next walk, took some notes, and then used those notes to make a comic. After creating the first one, I just kind of knew. I had this feeling, and I was like, I just need to put this out there for other people to find, even if nobody ever does. So I decided to just go for it. This is the very first installment of Seattle Walk Report that I posted online. It's kind of hard to read, so I'll just share a little highlight here. I saw 21 dogs, which means I saw 3.1 dogs per mile. Pretty exciting. This is a more recent walk I took a while back, 13 miles around Greenwood, Crown Hill, Blue Ridge, Carkeek Park, and Broadview. I saw 12 bird baths in yards in Crown Hill, but no bathing birds, and I admired this clock on the left on 85th. I wrote landmark time. This clock on North 85th Street is part of a group of old street clocks that achieved landmark status together in 1981. Cute, because I think everything is cute, I guess. And then there was also somebody doing voice to text on their phone where they'll dictate a text message, and they said, "Tell him I hate bread." And I just love it. I still think about it all the time. Here's a photo I took of that clock. I had just learned a couple weeks before that it was part of a landmark nomination that went through in 1981, so I was happy to just be able to include that little tidbit in the comic. Anyway, it seems like for whatever reason, Seattle Walk Report started to resonate with people right away. And it only grew from there. I just kept walking and kept making the comic as more and more people began finding out about it and following along. A little less than a year into making the comic and sharing it online, I got a message out of the blue one day for the new editor of a Seattle-based publisher called Sidewalk Books, asking if I would be wanting to make a book together. I was like, it was a random Wednesday. I was at work, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. So yeah, 4 years, hundreds of comics, thousands of miles, and 2 books later, here I am. It's all pretty magical, and all because I just randomly decided to leave my apartment one day without a destination, and all without really knowing how on earth how to draw hands. What an inspiration. So for the Seattle Walk Report book, I walked over 65 miles through 23 neighborhoods to gather new notes and materials. And now I'll take you through some of the pages to show you a little bit about the process and how they came to be, which is similar to what I do for all my comics. Here's a page from my 8-mile walk around Capitol Hill, which I will now read for you. Cranes seen from the top of the water tower in Volunteer Park. 7. Baby ducks in pond. 8. Oh yeah. Overheard on Broadway. They may try, but they'll never take my eyeballs. This was said by a little kid, like a little 5-year-old, and I was like, huh, who are you? Stickers on fire hydrants. I did a survey of 30 Capitol Hill fire hydrants and found that there was an average of 7 street art stickers per hydrant, sticking it to the man. And then from everyone's favorite newspaper, the Seattle Daily Crier, scandal in Seattle. A greyhound is spotted on the tennis court at Capitol Hill's Volunteer Park, right next to a sign that clearly states, no dogs allowed. On the left, you'll see the page of notes I took during the Capitol Hill walk, which was one of the first neighborhoods I walked for the book. I'm basically just taking as many notes as I can. It's not very organized, it's kind of a mess, but I'm just trying to capture everything I'm seeing as quickly as I can. And then what I'll do is I'll then take those notes when I get home and refine them a little bit and try to group things together, see what might fit together. I try to write little jokes to make myself laugh. It's still just kind of a messy process. And then here's the progress of the page from the pencil version on the left to the final version. So I do a little pencil version first, that gets reviewed, and then I have the final version by the end of it. Wow. Here's another page from the book section on downtown featuring the Central Library. I'm really glad that the Central Library is so easy to draw. I did not struggle with this in the slightest. It was perfectly fine. I didn't cry at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was fine. The page says, the Central Library. There were 3 people washing the windows. And then I say, the Seattle Public Library's Central Library is made out of 9,994 pieces of exterior glass. I had thought about making 9,994 tally marks on this page, but even I have my limits, surprisingly. So I happened to take this walk on a day when the windows were being washed, which you can kind of see in this very zoomed in photo I took, some people washing the windows, so I thought that that was pretty cool. And then here you'll see the progress of the page from the pencil version to the final version. Here's another, let's see here. So here's another page that was developed in a slightly different way. It shows Canton Alley and Maynard Alley in Chinatown International District. In a speech balloon, I say, Canton Alley and Maynard Alley were the first 2 officially named alleys in Seattle. Even now, very few Seattle alleys have names. Here are some photos I took of the alleys during my walk. I knew I wanted to include them in the book because they felt a little bit special to me, but I didn't want to just have drawings of 2 alleys, so I did what I always do when I need fun facts about alleys. I turned to the library. And using my library card in the Seattle Times historical database, I found this article from February 8th, 1964, called Bilingual Signs Posted. In it, I learned that Canton Alley and Maynard Alley were given bilingual Chinese and English street signs in 1964, a full 50 years before a wider effort to install bilingual street signs in the International District in 2014. It was a cool discovery, and I was happy to be able to include that little historical tidbit in the book. And here's another thing that shows the process of the page. This one I had accidentally drawn the first version at the wrong size, so I had to redraw the whole thing. It was fine. This page from a section on downtown, is called The Wonderful World of Standpipes, and it was built almost entirely from photos I took during the walk. It says, once you start noticing the dizzying array of standpipe styles on buildings around Seattle, nothing in your life will ever be the same. This is true. I highly recommend doing some standpipe spotting next time you're out and about. I actually saw a very cool one on the outside of this very building, so next time you're out there, check it out. There's a great little group of 6. I was all excited about it. You won't believe your eyes and what's out there. These are the photos that I took of the standpipes for that book. It's so cute to me that these were just regular old standpipes, and now drawings of them will live on in a book in the Library of Congress forever. It just warms my little heart. And actually, to this day, people send me photos of standpipes all the time, and I'm like, bring it on, I'm really living the dream. Keep them coming. This is a page from the section covering my walk through SoDo and Georgetown called The Evolution of Georgetown City Hall. It reads, from 1904 until 1910, Georgetown was a separate city from Seattle. As such, city officials built a city hall in 1909 to house various city departments. Today, the building is a treasured landmark that still serves the community. Like the alleys in the International District, I knew I wanted to include this building in the book because it's just always kind of been one of my favorites, but I wasn't sure how to do it. But after some digging, I found old photos of the building in the Museum of History and Industry's digital collection and the library's digital collection. So here's the rough drawing of the first panel next to this photo from Mohi from 1909. Here's the second panel with another photo from Mohi, this one from 1925. Part of the building was actually a branch of the Seattle Public Library at this time, which I thought was really cool. And then I found this photo from 1966 in the library's collection showing the upper clock tower portion completely gone. I didn't know what happened, so rather than find out, I just wrote, whoa, because sometimes I'm lazy. And then I found this, and then this is what it looks like today, so I drew what it looks like today. Unfortunately for me and my laziness, my editor wrote, what happened? She was on to me. Digging around, though, turned up the Georgetown City Hall's National Register of Historic Places nomination form from 1984. Part of the text reads, by 1943, the remaining portion of the tower was threatened by vibrations from the adjacent airfield. It was dismantled. I was quite happy to solve that mystery and strengthen a page that I was already quite fond of. So those pages are just a few examples about how I approach writing this book. It was primarily a combination of note-taking, photos, research, and then just sort of seeing what happened. Some other highlights from my walking adventures for the book included a real-life Ballard beaver in Golden Gardens. I was so excited. In the Central District, I saw a Safeway basket with one claw inside, and then 7 blocks later, I saw the other claw. One claw would have been enough. What a time to be alive. A dog using a human drinking fountain in the International District, I swear. 2 buildings I had never taken the time to appreciate before in Fremont, and $1 under a tree in Rainier Beach. Actually, as a cute side note, there was this classroom mom that came to visit us in 1st grade and teach us how to draw 2 things and 2 things only. Macaroni noodles and the texture on trees. And I still draw both the same way. So thank you, Peter's mom, wherever you are. It really comes in handy. With both the Seattle Walk Report book and Instagram account, I've been interested in telling the stories of the more ephemeral finds of a long walk. The stressful balloons, the sidewalk socks there one day and gone the next, whatever. But something started to change after my first book came out, and I found that the things that were capturing my attention on walks were becoming the things that were a little bit more permanent. I didn't quite know what to do with what I was seeing, though. It didn't really, well, I included some historical tidbits in my first book. That wasn't really the main focus, and I just wasn't sure how to tell these kind of longer, more historical stories. So I thought I would just keep it to myself. So I had the comics that I was sharing, like this one around West Seattle, where I shared about the combs that I saw on Alki Beach, but not about this interesting Works Progress Administration stamp I saw on the seawall at Lincoln Park. It's a little hard to see, but it says WPA 1936, and I thought it was really cool. But then I saw something that would change my life forever. I was walking with a friend on Capitol Hill late one evening, a few months after my first book had come out. My friend was talking to me about something, and I stopped dead in my tracks. I saw something beautiful radiating from the side of a building on 14th and Pike, the old Seattle Artificial Limbs Company building, which I had walked by approximately 1 billion times before. I crouched down, the air stood still. For a moment, it felt like me and the Seattle Artificial Limbs Company building were the only two things on Earth. Because there, on the side of this building, stood a small rectangular door at ground level. In the middle of this little door was a shield-shaped emblem embossed with the words, Clark's Coal Chute, patented July 24, 1906, T.F. Clark, Seattle. To say it was love at first sight is an understatement. While crouched down, I did a quick internet search for Clark's Coal Chute, expecting legions of Seattleites to be talking about this going back decades, with glitzy profiles in the Seattle Times of this absolute hero of a coal chute door. Instead, nothing. No results. I knew in that moment that one way or another, the good people of Seattle needed to know about this old-timey coal chute. So I went all in, digging through census records, patent applications, newspaper databases, and photo archives, determined to piece together what I could about this mysterious man and his beautiful, beautiful coal chute that he was brave enough to name after himself. A coal chute that somehow, despite it all, despite the use of coal being basically dead in Washington state for over a century, was still standing. This coal chute had seen everything that had ever happened at 14th and Pike for over 100 years. When Keister's Ladies Tailoring College was there in 1911, Clark's coal chute was too. When somebody lit a match in the building next door because they were looking for something under their bed and lit the house on fire, my mother's worst nightmare, Clark's coal chute was there. And when I got distracted by a super cute golden retriever around 2014 and tripped on the sidewalk and everybody laughed at me, I didn't know it at the time, but Clark's coal chute was there. It's incredible. A few weeks after seeing the coal chute door for the first time and knee-deep in my research, I returned to 14th and Pike in the daytime to get a better photo of this object of my affection. Butterflies in my stomach, I'm all excited. I turn the corner, and the coal chute door is gone. Oh, no. Thank you. Replaced with a piece of plywood. Oh. A rented dumpster stood nearby. I felt like maybe it had all been a very elaborate dream. I looked around at my environment in a different way instantly. It all just came together. I started reflecting on all the photos I had taken over the last couple of months of the things that I was seeing on my walk. The coal chutes, of course, these little imprints on the sidewalk I had been noticing all over, these bricks, these lamps, these parks. How much did I really know about the things that I passed by every day on Seattle streets? I'd been so busy admiring the socks that I hadn't really noticed the sidewalk underneath them. Maybe they had a story just as worth telling. And like cosmic confirmation, as I was walking away to reflect on life, love, and coal chutes, the name of my upcoming memoir, I saw another Clark's coal chute on Capitol Hill, and another one. Big ones, small ones, rusty ones, ones in pairs, ones good for taking selfies with. Everywhere I looked, there was this little reminder of Seattle's past in Seattle's present. And that's how this book was born. One passionate evening of looking back on the photos I had taken over the last few months and thinking about what I knew and what I would like to know about this living history, and I had the outline for a book. I got the green light to make the book in March 2020, a completely unremarkable month that you probably don't remember because nothing really happened or anything. So now I'd like to show you some of the things I learned about in my research that ended up in my second book. One of the things that I'm most excited to have shed light on is the secret world of Seattle's sidewalk stamps. I don't know if you've ever seen these little gems, but in the early 1900s, when Seattle was first getting concrete sidewalks, it was common for the contractors selected for the job to stamp their name into the concrete, just as a way to advertise and to celebrate a sidewalk well paved. And I guess they also wanted to make an impression. Thank you. Across the city today, you can find these sidewalk stamps, denoting a sidewalk that is likely over 100 years old. One of the most common sidewalk stamps I've seen in Seattle is from the Sparger Concrete Company. I couldn't definitively prove it in my research, but I feel fairly confident that the Sparger Concrete Company paved more sidewalks in Seattle during the Great Seattle Pave Wave of the early 1900s than any other contractor. Sparger was very enthusiastic about concrete. He just loved this stuff. In 1910, he constructed the entire first floor of his Queen Anne home with concrete, floors, walls, and all. A little bit concerning, but we all have our passions, right? He also wrote to the engineering department requesting permission to use concrete pipes to connect houses to sewer lines, and received a response that said most emphatically, no. And then in 1929, in the sensitive words of the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, Sparger dropped dead at the age of 65. But his sidewalks live on to this day. Unlike the very, ooh, my microphone went. I was just too excited, I think.
This is what,
Nice, thank you. Yay. Unlike the very prolific Sparger Concrete Company, my second favorite sidewalk stamp I've actually only seen one of, near West Lee Street and an alley near 7th Avenue West on Queen Anne, but there may be more. It's sort of the bad boy of the Seattle sidewalk stamp scene. It's the mark of John Granger Pierce. John Pierce's dad, also named John Pierce, so for our purposes, let's call him Papa Pierce, made his fortunes in Sioux City, Iowa real estate in the late 1800s before losing it all in the Panic of 1893, considered the worst economic crash prior to the Great Depression. Looking for a way to settle his debts, Papa Pierce devised a plan to sell raffle tickets with his grand 21-room Sioux City mansion as the prize. A successful scheme that led him to sell over 40,000 tickets nationwide at $1 a piece, which is about $30 today. However, it turned out that the entire mansion raffle was fixed to favor some New York millionaire that Papa Pierce owed money to. Can't we just get an honest mansion raffle around here for once? So Pierce and his family just left Sioux City and started anew in Seattle in 1900. So in Seattle, Papa starts working with his son John as general contractors, and then John ends up taking over the family business and then gets appointed to the Seattle City Council in 1911 after a council member had to resign due to illness. When his seat was up for election the following year, Pierce decided to run, and he won only to resign 2 years later when it was revealed that he had sought illegal contributions to the campaign of somebody running for Seattle mayor. But I guess he must have been doing something right, because at least one of his sidewalks lives on to this day as a concrete monument to disgraced former Seattle City Council members. Maybe you want me to lighten the mood a little bit with a tale of one of downtown Pioneer Square's most overlooked icons, the ornamental street lights that line many of the streets, called cluster lights. If you've been downtown at any point in the last 100 years, you may have seen one of these, whether or not you've taken a moment to reflect on their beautiful presence. What you may not know is that this style of streetlight has been lining Seattle's busiest thoroughfares for over a century. The idea for the city's cluster lights dates back to the 1900s, when Seattle had a mission to become the best lighted city in America ahead of the 1909 Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition, Seattle's first World's Fair. Buzz over a plan to install streetlights began in 1906, but it wouldn't be until January 1909 that 3rd Avenue's 117 cluster lights were first illuminated. The city went wild. The demand for more was immediate. Within weeks, petitions and permits were flying from business owners and residents across the city, eager to see these lights on their own blocks. And they actually quickly became a selling point to downtown living. Everybody is trying to get onto 3rd Avenue now to enjoy the cluster lights. Don't blame them, read an apartment ad from February 1909. And the whole thing worked. Directory publisher R.L. Polk, visiting in June 1909 to get an early look at preparations for the expo, called Seattle one of the handsomest cities in the entire country, and remarked that the cluster lights, which by then had spread to 1st and 2nd Avenues, give the whole section an appearance of splendor difficult to describe. After visiting in September 1909, the mayor of Atlanta agreed, saying, "Seattle has a lot of things we want down in Atlanta, and cluster lights is one." It wasn't all sunshine and roses, of course. As more and more cluster lights were installed, there was a fair amount of pretty boring drama, which, considering what I find interesting, must make it pretty boring. In 1910, the Seattle Times read the headline, "Cluster Light Fad Will Prove Costly." But they weren't just a fad. The lights continued to be the talk of the town in the years that followed. The Seattle Times, apparently quickly switching cluster light alliances, wrote in 1912 that the attractive streetlights of the metropolis of the Pacific Northwest had been a source of wonder and admiration of visitors ever since the cluster system was installed. An electrical engineer at a meeting later that year to discuss the various types of street lighting remarked, "I think Seattle has the finest example of street illumination from post and cluster lights that there is in this country. I will go further and say the cluster lamps in Portland are not 1/3 as good." Oh, Portland, boo! I'd be pretty embarrassed of my cluster lights if I were you, Portland. So that's it. There have been refurbishments and replacements along the way. Some of them have been moved around, but essentially that style of streetlight that you see downtown has been dotting the landscape down there for everyone who has passed through in the last 100 years and were once a source of great pride for the city. The last of my favorite things that I learned about and wrote about for the book that I want to share is about the sinking ship parking garage in Pioneer Square. It was on this weird triangular piece of land that the first permanent home of the Seattle Public Library opened the doors to its reading room in April 1891 on the 5th floor of the elegant Occidental building. The library moved a few years later, and the Occidental building served a number of purposes before falling into disrepair. Damage from an earthquake in 1949, followed by a partial collapse in 1961, compelled the city to demolish the building, quickly replacing it with a parking garage called the Sinking Ship. The name had a double meaning, as it both looked like a sinking ship and felt like it was emblematic of Seattle itself. The ease with which the city was able to let a historic building die and get replaced with a concrete parking garage set off huge alarm bells for those early 1960s architects, professors, preservationists, and everyday citizens, many of whom feared that the days of Seattle's other historic buildings would be numbered if development were left unchecked. Through the efforts of a grassroots movement, Pioneer Square was designated as a National Historic District in 1970 and later as Seattle's first preservation district. I cannot overstate how much people disliked this parking garage. Some of you may remember it. It felt like the end of days. However, in true Seattle fashion, everything is cool again once enough time has passed. In 2019, an international architecture publication named the once-loved sinking ship the coolest parking garage in the United States and said it was iconic. Think of another building you just really don't like today, one that feels emblematic of everything wrong with Seattle. I won't name names. And then imagine Seattle celebrating it 60 years down the road. And honestly, it's probably going to happen. For many, that thing was the sinking ship, and now a lot of people are kind of into it. All we are is dust in the wind, you know? Anyway, Seattle Walk Report aside, walking has completely changed my life and how I see the world. Having this little corner of life where it's totally about the journey and not the destination has been really liberating and taken me places that I never thought I would have the opportunity to go. It's given me a whole new appreciation for Seattle. A lot of people ask, how do you get into walking if you don't know where to start? And I have a few pieces of advice just based on my experience. One is just to be open to possibility. Part of the joy of walking for me was spontaneously deciding to veer down a side street I've overlooked or using a sidewalk closure as an opportunity to change the course of my walk. So now whenever I'm going to a nearby destination like a grocery store or the library, I just shift it over a block or two and see what happens. Even that can lead to some really interesting discoveries in my own neighborhood. Another thing is to be safe. If something feels off for any reason at all, just do something else. One day I was walking around Tacoma and I ended up kind of near the Pacific Highway near Fife, which was more fun than it sounds, and things were going great. And I ended up spotting a pool chair surrounded by 7 of the exact same shoe. Even though I had intended to walk more, I was on a bus within 1 minute. 8 shoes, maybe. 7, no thank you. I also just don't typically walk with distractions like headphones or my phone. I just like to look around and be present in there. And then the other thing is just to let go of any notion that there is a right way or wrong way to take a walk. And all walks, whether they last 4 minutes or 4 miles, have a potential to be a really great experience. Before I started walking, I would occasionally check out walking guidebooks from the library, and I'd feel a little bit discouraged. I feel like if I take this walk, I might miss out on the things I'm supposed to see. And also, as somebody who doesn't drive, I'd be like, wow, that West Seattle walk sounds great, but it would take me an hour and a half to get there by bus, and by then, half the day is gone, you know? So when I realized that every walk could start right outside my front door and take me anywhere I had the time and stamina to go, it really opened up a lot for me. So overall, just start small. There's no way I could have walked 30 miles when I first started. I couldn't even walk 3 without crying and my feet becoming blister city. And these days, for the most part, I have been keeping my walk shorter and more closer to my own neighborhood. I always encourage people to declare yourself the official walk reporter for your block. Find your favorite mailbox, front door, sidewalk crack, or a tree. Try looking at your neighborhood like you've never been there before, or like you're a detective who is working undercover to develop a neighborhood profile for the world's least exciting top secret mission. You may just find that you start to see Seattle in a whole new way. Some other things I really like if you do get a little bit more into walking is a good pair of shoes, of course. I love a good pair of insoles. Wool socks instead of cotton socks. This being Seattle, a waterproof jacket is pretty essential. And then the other items I'll usually bring with me are snacks, sunglasses, sunscreen, an extra pair of socks, and a water bottle. I also like a good backpack that has 2 straps so I don't, hopefully, hurt my back. So that is Seattle Walk Report. And really quick, I just want to share something. In February 2020, which feels like 40 years ago, I had the privilege of visiting an after-school art club at Genesee Hill Elementary School in West Seattle, mostly comprised of 1st and 2nd graders. I had done a lot of talking to grown-ups about Seattle Walk Report at that point, but I had never talked to kids. And I wasn't sure if they would get it, if it would resonate with them at all, what they would get out of it. So I was kind of nervous. And I made a little worksheet. Even though I usually just take notes, I thought maybe this will help kind of guide them. So in Genesee Hill Walk Report, let's see here, there were different categories for the kids to fill out on this little worksheet. So the categories for Genesee Hill Walk Report include draw something that is your favorite color, draw 2 different chairs you see, count how many backpacks you see in the classroom, draw something on the floor, draw something on the ceiling, draw something that is round, draw something from outside the classroom, and draw anything. To my mild surprise, they totally got it. They were super excited about it. I got a little bit of pushback. For example, they did not believe for a second that I saw that dog using a human drinking fountain in the International District. And there's nothing like having a group of 1st and 2nd graders yelling at you that you're a liar. I was like, you have to believe me, kids. You have to believe me. But they were like, no, you didn't. But otherwise, it was completely wonderful. And I wanted to share 2 in particular here. I love this student noticing a single potato chip on the ground outside and labeling it so clearly. Truly a future walk reporter and kid after my own mundane heart. And then this other student really went above and beyond. On the ceiling, I know, on the ceiling they noticed the tiniest spider web in the corner of the classroom that I didn't even see at first. On the ground, they discovered a wood chip. Under something that is round, most students drew the clock, but this kid found the round lips on a stuffed rooster, a label on a book bin, a bead, the 0 on a clock, the part of the pencil sharpener where you insert the pencil, and a circle on a poster. And outside they found a branch, another potato chip sighting, a Valentine's Day bag, some pokey plants, a tennis ball can, and sticks in a flower bed. It was really delightful and encouraging to see kids inspired by their surroundings in this way. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. If anybody has any questions, I would love to answer them. Otherwise, I just really appreciate you all being here today. It's really awesome to have the opportunity to share something I'm so passionate about with so many people. So thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, that's a neat idea. Yeah, great idea.
I have one,
Yes.
and I have a microphone, so I don't have to yell. How long does it take you to, from beginning to end, execute a page like that Seattle Library one, for example? Something that's really intricate.
It depends. I tend to draw pretty much as close to the way that I want the final product to look as, I really do think in some ways that Sally Kilroy book did teach me to draw in the wrong way, because I don't really sketch things out as much as I draw them as close to the final product as I'd like. I'd say depending on the page, it's maybe an hour or an hour and a half. Sometimes with the really complicated stuff, if I'm trying to get a building exactly right, it can take a little bit longer than that, or there's a lot of kind of erasing going on. So it just sort of depends. Some of the ones that are a little bit more simple, just a tree or something, I can maybe do in 30 minutes or something like that. Yeah?
What's your next project?
Great question. So the question was, what's my next project? So something funny happened it was back in October where I actually injured my foot. And it was very slow to heal, and actually only in the last couple of weeks has it gotten better. So a lot of my walking has been sadly, was on the sidelines for a while. And that's so much of how I get my inspiration and that sort of thing. So I actually have it, I'm hoping to get back out there and maybe find something that, propels me to the next thing, but I just don't know what it is yet. We'll see what happens. Stay tuned.
Have you ever considered doing sections of Seattle? We've seen those books of, what are they, Ravenna and Pike Street Market, and have you ever thought about doing that, sections like
where I walk every street?
Neighborhoods?
Yeah.
Maybe 3 neighborhoods together, and because each neighborhood seems to have its own history.
Yeah.
And interesting buildings.
That is actually one of the things when I pondered doing another book, I thought about what if I really zeroed in on one particular neighborhood and made a whole book just about that neighborhood, incorporating the history and also the walking stuff and everything else. I think I would just need to make sure I find a neighborhood that really feels like it has a lot of history that I'm interested in that I haven't already talked about. But I was thinking that some sort of thing that kind of combines the spirit of my first book and the spirit of the second one kind of together into this thing that's really focused on a particular neighborhood is one of the few ideas that I've had for, ways to kind of move this along and do something new with it. Yeah. Yes?
One of the things I noticed when I take a walk are masks.
Oh, yes.
Many, many masks everywhere.
Yeah. It's interesting to see. I was sharing different comics online, and it's kind of funny to see how things sort of have changed, even just in the last couple of years. And now I have this interesting sort of record going back a couple of years of suddenly I'm seeing masks on the ground everywhere, or for a while I was seeing a lot of rainbow signs in windows and that sort of thing, or suddenly everybody had puppies. So being able to kind of capture those little things like that, it's just become kind of an interesting chronicle of Seattle and the city and of my own life. Just I will remember different things I was thinking or feeling while I was going on different walks, and now I have this sort of kind of record of it, which is pretty cool. Yes?
Where did you go to school in Seattle?
I went to Shorecrest High School in North Seattle. My college adventure was kind of interesting. I started to go to this program at Seattle Central Community College that got canceled a couple months into it. And so I kind of needed to scramble to figure out what I'm doing with my life. I don't think I mentioned it here, but I work for the Seattle Public Library. I've worked there since 2010 now, so about 12 years. And so that's kind of, this is just kind of some hobby that got out of hand. But, the library is kind of my main health insurance source and everything else, so.
It's perfect.
Yeah, it all comes together. It definitely, if I didn't work for the library and kind of have learned so many things along the way about research and about what's out there, I definitely couldn't have made my second book.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again. That was really lovely.